The last attribute we're going to look at is bump. Bump is required this month, so we'll go ahead and hook that up together. Um, so really bump spec are the only two that I really care that you guys are using. Again, if you want to use some presets, by all means, throw some presets on there. As you change your presets, you would have to move kind of your bump between those presets, though. It won't follow along as you change materials. So let's jump into Maya and take a look at this. So if we go to our PXR surface and we come down to globals, this is where we're going to want to add our bump. If we click here, we don't want to add a file node like we did, like you saw me do to some of the other attributes. You want to go under RenderMan patterns, and you want to look for PXR bump. So you can kind of look through and scroll and find it, or else you can start typing PXR bump up here, and it'll kind of find it here. That might be the faster way of doing it. So now that bump is hooked in correctly, now we want to pump a texture into it. So I'm going to click here because my project's set. It goes to my source images. We've already painted all our bumps for the coil, so you should have all those. I'm going to use the dust here. It already baked out a texture already, so I'm going to use the .tex version of that. And because it's black and white, we can use it as a bump as well. So I'm going to also take the glass off, because it might be harder to see the bump with the glass. And I'm going to turn my diffuse gain all the way back up, my spec, because without spec it's going to be hard to see bump. And just a little bit of face color. And let's take the roughness down to 0.1 if you still have that cranked up, because with the high roughness it's going to be difficult to see bump as well. So let's go ahead and render this. And we can see the bump's pretty crazy on here. If you see anything that gets really kind of black like this, I consider that clipping. So you're trying to bump too much. It's more than kind of what a bump map can actually give us. So I would just dial that back a little bit. So let's go down to our bump map. So if I click this input, it'll take me to the attributes. And you'll just want to go lower with your scale. So let's try 0.5. In past lectures, I've talked about halving the values when we're dealing with lighting and texturing. Then I'll hit R again. And you can still see the bump is very intense. We're not clipping as much in certain areas. But it still doesn't seem like we lost that much bump value. If anything, we're kind of gaining some because we're no longer kind of clipping some of those values. So let's go to 0.25. That's looking better. We're still clipping some values here. We're not really losing too much detail up top. Let's go a little lower. So let's go, 0.15. Hit escape, hit R. And that was while I was in the IT. So I think we're pretty close. Like, still a couple values I would consider as clipped, meaning that they're looking pretty close to all black. But we can let those render out. But we're getting a nice little kind of pockmark sort of thing, or bump to our surface. So it just kind of adds to it, right? So all these maps that we end up making or painting just start adding to the complexity and the realism of the shader. Bump is one of the main ones that you guys need to be making for this month, so make sure you understand how to hook it up. And if you want to try different materials, like if you want to try some presets here, let me hit escape. I can show you how to transfer your bump. So this is PXR Surface 1. I'm going to go to the preset editor. Let's go to materials, and I don't know, let's find something kind of fun. Let's try like this maroon plastic. So I'm going to right click, import and assign. And then if I go to Windows, Rendering Editors, Hypershade, I'm going to see that PXR Surface 1 and the maroon plastic. So I held down Shift and I selected both of those, and I can map their input-output connections right here. And I have one or two options. I can either share this bump, so this is my bump map node. If I want to do that, I would just drag, just click on here, and actually let's open this up. We want to click on result N and drag out of that. So I was just double clicking on here till it opened up with result N, and then put that into bump normal. And now we're sharing this map between the two. So if we swap back and forth from those materials, we don't have to worry about switching out the bump. If we want the bump just on one of those materials, I could have just grabbed this guy and plugged it right in. But if you're just choosing materials and you're not sure what you're going to settle on yet, it's fine to share that bump between multiple materials. So now we have that orange plastic with the exact same bump on it. Remember, all of this when we're using maps is reliant on you having your UVs laid out. So if things look kind of weird and stretching and stuff is happening, it's most likely because your UVs are not laid out or they're laid out poorly.